Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I'm your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we are talking your one thing with Jeff Redmon. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, and Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm. Please click the subscription button below, and that will help us deliver better content to you, our wonderful listeners. And also know that you can catch our Club E podcast on your favorite platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. All right, with that, I would like to welcome back Jeff Redmon. And Jeff, I don't know how many times you have been with us, but probably more than anybody else. So we greatly appreciate your time and visiting with us today. Jeff is a lawyer, a business person, and founder of Breakthrough Impact Group. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be back.
And you can find out more information on the Breakthrough Impact Group at Min, and that's spelled MINN, big, BIG.com, minbig.com. And also Jeff's contact information is going to be in the description below. All right, Jeff, as I mentioned, you've been with us several times. You and I do work. You've been supportive of me personally. I'm greatly appreciative of that. You've done a lot of the legal work for various entities and endeavors that I'm involved in. Thank you for all of that. Today, we are going to talk about your one thing. But before we get to that, talk a little bit about, what you've been up to. I know you've been traveling. You got a trip coming up shortly, but tell us a little bit about what you've been up to and then the event that you're going to be hosting in April.
Sure. Thanks again for bringing me back to Club E. Rick, you just continue to bring a great, diverse, quality speakers to the platform. I'm humbled to be asked back again. I'm trying to squeeze in. Spent 10 days in Hawaii. On Thursday, I'm off to Fiji. I'm trying to squeeze in my professional life. As you know, my most recent venture that I'm really excited about is Breakthrough Impact Group, and I'm pleased to have you involved in that as well. It's CEO Roundtable on steroids, which involves a lot coaching and helping them figure out their one thing. Been a lawyer since 1982, so this is my 40th year. Little do people know that I started practicing law when I was 12. So that's how I got my 40 years in. People kind of ask me what I'm doing. At our big group last week, I shared kind of my idea. We were working on everybody's ideal customer prospect, and I kind of threw out mine, and I think it really describes both my law clients and our coaching clients. My ideal client is the humble, hungry, unemployable entrepreneur who wants to have impact both personally and professionally. And it's kind of something that I've noticed about my clients. They're so entrepreneurial, most of them would have a hard time holding down the job. So everybody got a kick out of that I describe them as unemployable. Most of them are very successful, but unemployable. So it's fun. I really enjoy what I do. Event, Glenn Dahl is another good friend in this community. On April 26th, we're very, very pleased to bring, and you had her on Club E a week or so ago, Shannon Susko. She is the founder. She's really an internationally recognized speaker. She's written several best-selling books. And she was the founder of the 3-HAG Way, the 3-year highly achievable goal that we use in BIG. And she's coming, we'll talk a little bit more later, but she's coming April 26th for an all-day CEO leadership bootcamp. and hopefully CEOs will bring their leadership team. And I don't care whether you don't have a one-page plan, you don't even know what a three hag is, or if you have your three hag and you have a sophisticated one-page plan, Shannon will help. And so I'm hoping that people um, sign up for that, and we'll share the registration information later.
And I'm going to ask a question to have you dive in a little bit more into big Min Big. But before we get there, I know another great part of your life, which you didn't mention, is being a grandfather. And given some of the health challenges that you had in the past, I'm sure these travels and sharing and spending time with your grandchildren have been a real joy for you.
Oh, absolutely. We just, in fact, yesterday, so I'm in the hospital a year ago. And since I got out of the hospital, I had my 5th grandchild. And yesterday we went over there and celebrated her 1st birthday. So it's awesome. I have 5 grandkids, and we always try to get them in to everything that we do. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, well, I'm happy for you. And I know, as I've mentioned, you've been very impactful and beneficial to me on my personal journey, not just the professional one. So thank you for doing that. Hey, talk a little bit more about Min Big, how it's different than other CEO peer-to-peer groups, and maybe just talk a little bit about how it's different and how it's unique.
Yeah, so I've been running CEO Roundtable since 1984. I actually approached you a few years ago to say, hey, maybe we should do a roundtable. You challenged me to say, well, there's plenty of roundtables out there. What could we do that would be unique and valuable to the community? And that was a great question. So we've really thought about what our core clients need. And so in addition to the typical CEO roundtable, the half-day session with CEOs sitting around a table or virtually and sharing, we bring coaching. So outside of the meeting, we help each company come up with their one-page plan, and we use the 3HAG system. So they all have a 3HAG, a 3-year highly achievable goal. And what's a little different than most CEO roundtables is by creating that one-page plan, we drive the learning to the leadership team. So the leadership team is involved so that we get focus and alignment on the whole team. And so I think that's unique amongst most of the coaching organizations. You know, you have business coaches, you have roundtables. We've tried to bring the two together in a very affordable system. You know, to get a one-on-one business coach, it can be very expensive, and we tried to make this very affordable by leveraging the power of groups. So I'm excited about doing it, and we're having impact. We got companies moving the needle, and that, you know, that's exciting. That's what I really like seeing.
Yeah, and you're definitely the pilot. And I was talking to somebody the other day, a woman that I introduced to you, a CEO, and I told her that my job was to put sprinkles on the cupcake. And you and I got the one woman in our group unstuck. There was a national vendor who frankly wasn't doing a very good job for her, and we were able to make a few phone calls and get her unstuck. So you said big word there, which was impact. And so, yes, I think we are adding impact to those companies.
And I'll give a little shout out to you. So, you know, they're working with a national vendor, express the frustration to the group, not even asking for help. And Rick raised his hand and made a couple of phone calls, and it happened that one of his contacts knew the president of the organization she was working with, and literally got an email within hours to get it unstuck. So the power of connections and network was really, it was fun to see, and so much appreciated by our member who wasn't even asking for help. She just was expressing her frustration, and we were able to give her a little nudge. So it's fun to have that kind of impact.
Absolutely. I wish it was always like that. It isn't always that good, but that definitely was one where we helped her out and as you said, move the needle and push them forward. So thank you for the hat tip there. So talk a little bit about your one thing. What should we and what should the clubby audience know about your one thing?
Yeah, so when I started my business coaching almost 15 years ago, I started with Vern Harnish. Many of you know him for the scaling up. He was kind of the father of one-page plans, the EOS one-page plan from Gino Wickman. He talks about using Vern Harnish's one-page plan in the EOS system. And Vern at the time, he talked about, we all have too many things. Really, let's look for 5 things that you focus on. And then over time, it's like 5's too many. I think you should focus on 3. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, the really focus has been, what's the one thing that would have the biggest impact in moving the needle, whatever it was. I've done this presentation and talked about it many times. I have actually started a workshop with a video clip from City Slickers where Billy Crystal is out with Curly, played by Jack Palance, and Jack Palance holds up his gloved hand. They're riding horses and said the secret to life is your one thing. And of course, Billy Crystal asks, what's your one thing? Your finger? Like, no, you have to decide what your one thing is. And I think it's a good lesson for all of us in life, but also in our business, that what's that one thing that will have the biggest impact? And as Curly says, that's what you have to figure out. So today we'll talk about some processes on how you can figure out what your one thing is.
All right, so that's a clever way to look at it. I always like thinking about movies and different analogies and stuff. So I like that. So tell everybody, because now I'm going to hold up my finger, don't have a glove on, but say, so how do we figure out our one thing?
Yeah, and I'm going to start, and I'm going to share a kind of unusual, but I'm going to share a PowerPoint. So I'll get that going. I'll share my screen. I just have a handful of slides, and these slides would be available if people will reach out. I'm happy to share these handful of slides with people, and just want to confirm, Rick, you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yep, you're all good.
Yeah, so I think a powerful way to help figure out your one thing is referencing Jim Collins. Of course, he wrote Good to Great, and he introduced in his, the concept that the great companies had in common was what he coined the hedgehog concept. And it's the Venn diagram, it's the intersection of your core purpose. Why does your company exist? What do you do best in the world? And where's the economic engine? And that little triangle in the middle, that's where Jim Collins says your BHAG should be. And I would suggest that's where your one thing ought to be there. Well, how do you figure that out? And I'm just quick overview of Jim Collins, Good to Great. He talks about disciplined people, the right people in the right seats, disciplined thought, confronting the brutal truths, the brutal facts in your life and business. And then the hedgehog concept is what starts breaking you through to get to the next level, and then ultimately disciplined action. So it's really in that hedgehog concept that your one thing becomes important to start accelerating your business. You know, Shannon Susko talks about growing your business with speed, ease, and confidence. And when you have that one thing figured out, it really allows you to ignore lots of the clutter that we often have in our life. In his book, Good to Great, he references what he called the flywheel, but Jim Collins came out with a monograph. It's about, I don't know, maybe 100 pages. And it really digs in to what the flywheel is and how you figure it out. So I'm just going to share a couple of examples. I think that's the best way.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask. So you're going to share some examples of some companies that have used their one thing?
Yep.
Right.
And so the flywheel is what accelerates your growth, that drives and gets a complete circle. And he mentions is the doom loop, where if you start overreacting and you start moving in the wrong direction, and actually some of the Good to Great companies made that mistake, and after they're on his primo list, a few years later, they're literally out of business because of the doom loop. So I'm going to share a couple of examples. So Jim Collins meets with this guy and his leadership team, never worked with them again, but he spent a couple of hours with them and describing the flywheel. We now know it as Amazon. Their flywheel, and you always start at the top at 12 o'clock, lower prices on more offerings. That allows to get the flywheel, causes that to increase your number of customer visits. It attracts more third-party sellers because you have more customers. I want to sell to those people. That attracts their third-party sellers, allows them to expand and extend their distribution, which generates more revenues per fixed cost that allows them to lower their price. That's the Amazon flywheel. Not everybody's going to grow and be, a multi-billion-dollar company. So I like to share the next one. This is an elementary school, Fort Riley, Kansas, on a military base in Kansas. Kind of fun for me because my sister was 39 years in the Army, and she was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas for a while. I don't know if she had her son went to school there, but they have an elementary school, limited budget, lots of turnover in the military people. So there's change all the time. And they had something like 35% of their students were performing at grade level proficiency. The principal, this is where I think, well, I'm not Amazon, I can't do it. Well, the principal says, I can't change my funding. I can't get the state to change my funding. I can't get the military to change my funding. She created her own flywheel. She knew that she needed to select passionate teachers, young teachers, because that's all she could afford, that would then build a collaborative improvement team to help them be better teachers and start teaching kids, but assessing their progress early and often that will show results. And then by achieving learning, it enhances their reputation. They then are able to attract passionate teachers, and the flywheel is going. And so here you have small organization, independent, much like a lot of our viewers, a lot of the clients that we see. You can take this on. Now, they went from 35% grade level proficiency to 50 to 60 to 70. They're at 90%, and they've been able to maintain that for 15 years. So I like to share this one because it makes it accessible to the people that we normally talk to. But that's how you need to figure out what's that one thing that's key to the growth in the flywheel. Amazon, it's low prices. For Ware Elementary, it's passionate teachers that really care about kids. Intel is another one that people are aware of. I just have a couple more to share, but they were doing chips that were really the rave. They were able to charge high prices before other people caught on. They were then, by attracting customers, they could drive down their unit costs. They would harvest the profits before competition would catch up, and then reinvest those profits to get the next level of chip that they could sell at a premium price. And they've evolved this flywheel from their initial chips. Technologies changed, but this is still Intel's flywheel. And I just have one other one that's a product. Gyro is a bicycle vendor. They invent great products. That's their deal. And what they do is they get elite athletes to use them. Their big jump start was a kid named Lance Armstrong, who wore their helmet in the time trial that allowed him to win the Tour de France by 9 seconds. So now everybody else wants to wear what Lance Armstrong wears. Their flywheel inspires weekend warriors like myself to buy and wear stuff that Lance Armstrong wears. Then that attracts mainstream customers, builds their brand power, and then they continue to set high prices and profits. They push that back into R&D. And now from a helmet, they have a whole range of products. But this is the flywheel they use. They introduce a product, they get top athletes to use it, get notoriety, and then they drive it through the system. So that's the flywheel, and it's a good way for, if you understand your flywheel, your one thing will be obvious. It'll be at the top of that flywheel. And I will share again my PowerPoint with anybody. I won't go through this in depth, but here is Jim Collins, how you capture your flywheel, what you did to get success, what are your failures, you compare, you start figuring out what really works, you start sketching out your flywheel. If you did this with a leadership team, I encourage the owner to mock one out, but go ahead and let your team do it independently and then come back and see the commonalities. And I've done this with lots of my clients now. We've helped them create their flywheel. And then it starts, the conversation then becomes, how do we get more of that one thing? So that's why the one thing is so important. So that's the flywheel. I think it's a really powerful way to help you identify your one thing. And if anybody wants to email me their flywheel, I'm happy to look at it, and I'll share my comments and review. I've looked at lots and lots of them, and be prepared that I'll challenge you. And but I'm happy to review your flywheel and share it. So if anybody watching or listening wants these slides or wants me to look at their flywheel, I'm happy to do that. Here's another, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so here's just another kind of checklist on your one thing. Write down your first instinct. Test it against your hedgehog. Again, where your passion, where you're best in the world, where the economic engine overlaps, that's your hedgehog, and test it against your flywheel. And then does it add momentum to your progress on your flywheel? Does this absolutely drive to the next part of the flywheel that drives to the next? If it doesn't add momentum, you got to keep looking. And again, if you email me these things, I'm happy to look at it, challenge you. I've helped lots and lots of people. I love to do it. And I'll be happy to share my comments. And again, It's all about momentum.
So I was going to ask, how about you with some of your coaching engagements through MinBig or the other CEO groups that you've been doing? How about some of your clients? Obviously, you can't share the names of the companies, but what about some of your individual experiences?
Yeah, so the one thing, lots of different examples. My very first coaching engagement, almost 15 years ago, the one thing ended up being selling more to current customers. That company was stuck at about 8 million for 3 years. They were, like many of us, they were trying everything to move the needle. And through this process, through looking at their flywheel and their one-page plan, we figured out it was selling more to current customers. And for 3 years, we didn't add one new customer. All we did was, and the needle moved from 8 million to 10 million the next year, to 13 million and 16 million in 3 years. So they doubled their sales in 3 years. All they did was focus on current sales to current customers. Now, as we did that, we had to improve systems because they doubled their business. And so those are the things you work on in your one-page plan. And they actually only added one FTE. But we also recognized that we were peaking out. So now how do we move? It's cyclical. How do we move to the next scale up? What else did we have to do to keep moving it up? So your one thing may change over time. I've seen clients target their core customer, so that they sell too many things to too many people, but they make 80% of their revenue from 10 or 20% of their customers. Well, then why are we selling to those other customers? Sharpening your core customer and even shedding non-core customers is sometimes the one thing. During COVID, one of my clients moved from doing custom work to off-the-shelf stocked items, and it changed their whole sales system as a retail outfit. But we were able to do that, and their sales have jumped dramatically at lower costs because they don't have to train their people on how to take custom orders, and now their inventory is way higher. But so those are a few examples of how we've moved to what people are using as their one thing. Lots of examples there.
All right, cool. You mentioned the CEO and leadership bootcamp. Jeff, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I should be still sharing my screen. Yep. So the Thursday, April 26th, there's Shannon's picture. Shannon started and sold a couple of companies in the, it was in the merchant processing space, IT space, big sales, doesn't have to work. She loves helping. So there's about 80 of us that she's trained in her 3HAG system, but she's the guru. She's the one. I've seen her talk 20 times. Even just, recently your interview with her, every time I see Shannon, I learn something. And she's constantly learning, reading books, applying it. So Glenn Dahl and I very pleased to bring her to Minneapolis. She's going to do a 1-day, all-day boot camp, 3HAG boot camp, and it'll be for CEOs and leadership teams. So the pricing, we have a price for the CEO, but it's actually very discounted for your team because we want to bring your whole team. and it'll be really, really good. I think it's at the Renaissance Center in Bloomington, and there's the link. It's case sensitive, so it's at that bit.ly / all caps 3HAG and then lowercase bootcamp. If you go there, that takes you to the link to register. And pleased to have a couple of sponsors, Highland Bank and Gray Search. And so we're excited about that. So the registration will be in all of your postings for the website, but really excited, and don't miss the opportunity to see Shannon Susko, literally an international recognized thought leader. And we're really, really pleased, Glenn and I, to bring her to town.
Yeah, after talking with Shannon last week, brilliant business mind. We had a great conversation that folks can see on the Clubby YouTube channel or through our podcast. I would strongly encourage the CEOs out there to bring their teams and sit in and participate with Shannon's event. And Jeff, you had mentioned, which I'd like to highlight as well, a couple of the sponsors that are working with us to make this happen. Highland Bank, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the ongoing and longtime sponsors of Clubby. So we're very grateful to Highland Bank, again, a community banking organization in the Twin Cities Metro. And they do a wonderful job. I'm involved with that company as well. So firsthand experience on the support they can provide you business owners out there. And then new to the Club E family, Gray Executive Search and Strategy. Again, a wonderful sponsor in addition to what we're doing with this event. So thank you to Gray Executive Search and Strategy. And then Jeff, as you did mention, there's registration information in the description below. Now, you showed some people a number of interesting things on your PowerPoint, but just remind them, how can they get that from you?
If you just send me a request at jredmon@minbig.com, I'm happy just to share that PowerPoint. And again, if people want to share their flywheel or their one thing and how they got there, same place, jredmon@minbig.com. I just enjoy seeing those things and glad to give you my 2 cents. And as I always say when I share my input, you take what works and toss the rest. So
absolutely. And then a reminder for signing up for the event. It's a bit.ly registration, and it's 3HAG being all caps, and then bootcamp. So again, bit.ly /3HAG all caps bootcamp. All right, Jeff. So you've worked with a number of companies in the Brimacombe Capital portfolio. You've worked with countless companies through the various CEO roundtables that you've facilitated over the years. And when you get a chance to answer my question, when I finish, get a little long-winded sometime, but tell everybody about how many groups you've led, because that's interesting to me and I'm sure to others. Anyway, so you've also had all these clients in your legal profession. You've been involved in a number of companies at the board level. You've been involved in a number of businesses yourself. So if you were to add those all up, couldn't even come up with what that number probably was. But have you seen a common thread through those companies that you believe is similar to the ones that are most successful?
Yeah, there's a few different things. Just to answer your question, I've been doing roundtables since '84. At one point, I had as many as 6 roundtables going at once. So it literally is hundreds of members, and then, of course, my law practice. So I have seen lots and lots. You know, it's kind of like the good to great. You know, they were looking for what that thing was that brought them from good to great. And it's not a charismatic leader, although I have lots of really dynamic leaders. It really, I think it's focus and alignment. The ones that are really successful is figured out what they do, and they do it super, super well. Their teams know what they do well, and they make choices not to do things. And sometimes it's really difficult because it's a great opportunity. I'd love to help you, but you don't fit what we do. And that's, I think, the one thing that differentiates. And you can be successful, but what are the ones that have really moved the needle? I have one client. My client sold to an international firm. At the time, they had about 150 customers, and the new president, I still do work with them. He wanted to move from 25 million to 50 million, and I asked him his strategy, and he said, it's odd, but when I talked to my Swedish owners, I told him I needed to move from 150 customers to 7. There are 7 customers that control billions of dollars of injection molding in the medical space. And in fact, they've gone to 75 million. Now, he doesn't have 7 customers. He actually has 30, but they're all affiliated to those 7 that he identified. So it's really that hyper focus on knowing who you are and leveraging that to the nth degree.
So how about the opposite of that? All these companies you've seen over and over and over, what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is they don't hire Rick Brimacombe to help them.
Good answer.
Lots and lots of people have had that
Jeff,
opportunity.
if you got time to do another one of these, I'll schedule you right now. So thanks very much.
All right. No, I don't know. There's so darn many mistakes that people make. And maybe the biggest mistake that I see is that entrepreneur that is really, really smart at what they do, but they believe that they know everything. And so they often have to be the smartest person in the room. They don't take great advice from other people that have learned the hard way. I say it's all of us learn from mistakes. They just don't have to be yours. Why don't you learn from the mistakes of others? And that's what we do in a roundtable. If our members want answers, they can call you or me and we can give them answers. But to be in a room with 10 other business owners that have been there and done that and get the benefit of all of their experiences for input, I think that's the common thing that I see where people fail, is they don't listen and they're not open to learning from others.
Well, I've been around the block long enough, and the gray hair can attest to that I would agree with you on that one, very much so. So another interesting question for you here. There's been a variety of cool experiences that you've had in your business world. Personally, you've done a lot of interesting things, including swimming with sharks. I'm not sure that will provide the most important lesson that you would have liked to have learned earlier in your career. But if you could identify something that you said, wow, I wish I would have learned that earlier in my career, what would that have been?
Well, it kind of relates to what I say the mistake of the entrepreneur that fails. I've always been someone that wanted to learn. But the thing and actually it's Shannon Susko that helped me. I'm an Audible book listener. I say I read books, but actually I don't read anything anymore. I listen on Audible. And it was Shannon that challenged me to listen at 2.0 speed. And so I've upped my game. Last year I listened to over 200 books. And so I wish I was a learner earlier, because now I'm kind of a late learner and I have I feel as if I'm catching up. But I listen to these books really fast, and some of my friends will say, well, what in the world can you take out of a book that you've read twice as fast as normal people. And I said, well, I'm not quite sure, but I know I learned more than if I didn't read it at all. So in lots of my books, I think they're great. I've listened to them a dozen times. So I wish that I would have been a learner earlier. I've always been a learner, but I really have stepped up that game in the last few years, and it's fun to get new experiences, and then how do I apply them and help my clients with it? So that's been really fun.
Cool. All right, last question for you as we wrap up today. Thank you again for being here. Since you paid that nice compliment to me, you're definitely get a re-invite. Kind of jokingly say up at the cabin where the people who compliment me on my food and the cabin and such, they get invited back. So you're definitely going to get invited back to Club E. So thank you. What would be the one key takeaway that you'd like our listeners to bring with them as a result of listening to you here today?
Well, whether you use me or anybody else, you really try to figure out your one thing. What is it? What's that thing that if you did it would have the biggest impact? It doesn't mean you aren't doing lots of other things, but what's that one thing? And when you figure that out and then you help your team understand it, you then can focus your activity on that, and it's going to accelerate your business, and you'll get that alignment and focus, and truly you will move the needle. And so I'm really hoping people take it to heart and figure out their one thing that would make the biggest difference in their life, whether it's business or personal. These things impact your life. So I love people that understand their purpose and what their one thing is.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Jeff. Thanks for talking today. A reminder for anyone who'd like to connect with Jeff, you can find him at the MinBig website, and that is www.minbig.com. And then also a reminder to register for the April 26th workshop with Shannon Susko. That's a bit.ly/3 all caps HAG 3 HAG bootcamp. Bootcamp is in lower caps. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us today, and safe travels. Enjoy yourself, and look forward to having you back again.
Thanks. Thanks again.
Thanks.